fans? Welcome back to Room 237, and I'm back with another 70s, 80s slasher film. Kind of. This one actually plays with a number of genres. Uh, but this is 1979's Delirium, which not only is this part of Britain's Video Nasty list, this is yet another Video Nasty. I've done a number of those already, and I have a few more coming. But more specifically, the second Video Nasty list, meaning it was unable to be prosecuted, or it was initially, then it was changed, but was still seized. So this was under the less obscene category of list number 2. But this is also the fourth film, I think, with the title Delirium. There's the 1972 Italian Giallo, which I did the international cut. If I did the American cut, which is considered to be a much different movie, then it'll be five reviews with the title Delirium. The 1987 Lamberto Bava Italian Giallo, and a 2018 Blumhouse film with Topher Grace. All with the title Delirium, which I guess is a popular title. Though I would say its alternate title as Psycho Puppet fits a little bit more, or at least it would if its concept was developed a little bit more. And, of course, this is the Blu-ray that was put out by Severin. This is the very nice slipcover that they put out. Actually seems a lot sturdier than some other slipcovers that I've had. Actually, that came out this past February, along with Don't Go in the House. No, this is not the Severin edition. This is just an old, cheap version I picked up. Coincidentally, the same day I picked this up. Just, I've got to be cheap. I really like this movie, and I just wanted to have it, so I got the cheap version. But yeah, this is a movie I've heard of for a while, especially since I've been doing the Giallo reviews, and 2 of those were called a Delirium. Upon having to look up facts about them, of course, this pops up. Saw it was on the Video Nasties list, and that it essentially is a proto-slasher. I mean, it came out in 1979. At that point, we had Halloween. And also, I think that was the same year we had Driller Killer and Tourist Trap, both of which are slashers. In fact, the beginning kind of feels like a Driller Killer, at least the Killer of Charlie kind of reminds me of Abe Ferreira in a Driller Killer. But it eventually goes into like a detective procedural, which is fine. We've seen slashers that do that. What really comes to mind is Don't Answer the Phone and Night School, which, yes, Night School is a slasher film. I've heard people call it a drama just because of the procedural. No, it's a slasher. I've heard people call it a giallo because of the procedural and the mystery. And one person even said because of the fact the killer wears like a biker helmet and a leather jacket, like Strip Nude for Your Killer. Not enough to make it a giallo, plus it's an American film, so no. It's a slasher. Nightmare Beach, the killer has the same biker getup, and that's an Italian film, and that's a slasher. So, no, Night School is a slasher. So, this plays with genres. It goes from proto-slasher to detective procedural, which again, we have seen those together, but then somewhere in the second act, around the halfway point into the third act, it becomes like an action film with a little bit of comedy sprinkled all throughout. So I just don't know if this movie's going for variety, if it can't decide what it wants to do. But it does feel very unfocused. Now, it was directed by Peter Maris, who wrote the film with Richard Yalom, based on a story by Eddie Carell and Jim Lowe. It's kind of fuzzy on here because I had to take a picture because I don't have Wi-Fi here yet. And the music was by David C. Williams, released in October of '79. Doesn't tell me the budget, but it does feel very low budget. This does have a cool concept, though. This does, once we get past sort of the opening of just following this killer, sort of, it does feel more like a procedural film that just happens to bring the serial killer in every once in a while. Which the killer was played by Nick Panuzis, if I pronounce that correctly, which according to horrornews.net says looks like a cracked out Seth MacFarlane. I don't see that. He reminded me more of Bob Geldof from Pink Floyd's The Wall than he did anything Seth MacFarlane. But yeah, he's this mute who's a Vietnam vet. He kills this one girl, which is a cool kill, because she gets away from him, shuts her apartment door, like leans against it, and he takes a spear off the wall, throws it, we see it go through her. It does have some decent gore when it is there. Hell, even some of the gunshots, you see it just blood pour out of people like a faucet. So it has decent blood and gore. Not a whole lot, but... And then her roommate comes home. Oh, which actually she's on the cover here too. Gets the police involved, and these two detectives are pretty much trying to solve that case, the Spear Girl case. Which one detective kind of reminds me of Robert Stack from Unsolved Mysteries. Doesn't really look like him, but kind of sounds like him. And his young partner, who of course becomes her love interest, because of course he does. And then he just goes on what seems like a random killing spree, because it is. I mean, we see him steal a car, he picks up a hitchhiker, who tries, and despite how creepy and, you know, how many red flags this guy puts up, women just can't seem to resist him. I mean, the hitchhiker girl he picks up, he's just barreling down these back roads, very high speed, and then just stops, gets out, walks down to the beach and sits there. She kind of starts to berate him for driving crazy, but then decides to go skinny dipping and invite him into the water. He kills her. And then later on, he's walking and he ends up in this farmhouse where there's this woman there who tries to entice him into coming in. So even though he never utters a word, he looks sketchy. It's almost humorous how no one picks up on this. And of course, every time he goes into this killer frenzy, which even when he's sort of before, I think it's before he picks up the hitchhiker, before he picks up the car, he's thinking about the kill he did with the spear, but it's mixed with all these other memories that we hear through voiceover about, you know, how he can't get it up, or, you know, gonna tell all my friends. These embarrassing moments, he has flashbacks to Vietnam. Some of them are very lengthy, even involving killing children with grenades, which this movie did spark some controversy for not just how it depicted Vietnam, but also sort of being the catalyst for, like, whenever those pop into his head, that's when he goes on his killing frenzy. Which this came out a year after Deer Hunter, and I think the same year or a year after Apocalypse Now, so not like there was a whole lot of positive depictions of Vietnam at that time. But still, that was another form of controversy. All the while, the detectives are trying to catch up, and it seems kind of like a fun, or at least a low budget, entertaining enough kind of serial killer slasher film with detectives trying to catch up to him. All leads of Charlie lead nowhere. But then it takes this turn in where it becomes like a big conspiracy type movie, like where they unlock this conspiracy with rich people, or where rich people are involved, and turns into an action film. Which apparently the story that this was based on was used from an unused script about a what did it say? Unfinished urban conspiracy thriller, and added a new psycho killer procedural to create what may be the most unusual, vicious proto-slasher shocker of the 70s. I don't quite know about that. Of course, they gotta sell it. I will say the conspiracy aspect of it is very interesting. For readers of Batman, think Court of Owls, but on a much, much, much smaller scale. And actually, this guy, Charlie, is actually our secondary villain. He's, like, yeah, he's the main slasher. But, spoilers for those who haven't seen it. I guess I'll say spoilers here. But, it's not that I disliked the film, but I didn't really love it either. It just felt very disjointed. The score was alright at some parts. I mean, the first half did feel like a slasher film. I mean, when he attacks his victims, there is some cool camera work and editing, like where it's a lot of like freehand, and it's like up close and kind of frenetic, almost like you're part of the action, I guess. And then towards the end, when it becomes outright action, it feels like a totally different film. I kind of wish they just went one direction with it. I mean, and that would be keep the serial killer slasher aspect, keep the procedural, and just develop the conspiracy part more. I guess get rid of this character, despite how I'm sure a lot of people might think how fun he is. And just make it more of like this ominous group of people, without this, I guess, main antagonist that's a lot bigger than our main villain. But I'm going to say spoilers here. So, the roommate works for this one guy named Andrews. She's his secretary. And the two detectives feel he's suspicious because she says that this Charlie guy, before meeting up with her roommate, came into the office for a job interview, met with the boss, Andrews, but there's no application. He doesn't remember his last name, can't recall what he looks like. Also, they pieced together that it's weird that even though there was no appointment, he went straight into his office, yet he can't recall anything about him. And yes, Andrews is part of this secret organization of about 4 to 6 rich guys who have had some sort of injustice done to them. In Andrews' case, his daughter was raped and murdered. The killer was arrested, sentenced, but then, like, due to a technicality, he was released. And actually, in the very beginning of the film, the opening, we see a guy being beaten and captured. And so they have this kind of renegade group where they abduct the people that have wronged them, give them their own trial, yet at the same time, they also, like, they do that, but they have guys like Charlie working for them that just goes around sort of working the streets. I guess taking care of the people that aren't kind of related to them and their injustices. just sort of killing criminals, which I guess is where the Psycho Puppet uh, alternate title came into play. Which would have worked if they developed it more, because the whole idea is that, yes, he was working for these guys, but then just because of his psychosis and his Vietnam flashbacks and just everything else, because of his, I guess, delirium, he just goes off the rails. He goes off script and just goes on a killing spree. It causes all this shit. Starting with the Spear Girl. So they see Charlie as a problem. They gotta take care of him. And it's run by this guy named Stern. His character is Stern. He's played by Baron Winchester, who has done special effects on other films. I can't exactly remember what ones. There was one that I have seen. I just can't remember which one it was. And, I mean, he's over the top. He is fun. I guess they hired him as, like, a manager because he was in the military. But he's just as unhinged as Charlie and very militant and just death sentence to everybody. And eventually takes over. Charlie spends most of his time wandering around. He sneaks into one house while the woman's taking a bath, while he's looking for food. He kills the grocery guy, and then she has a shotgun. She shoots and kills him. And that's like the halfway point, I think. Maybe closer to the third act. And by this point, Andrews thinks that the cops are onto him. Thinks she's onto him because she's helping the two detectives. He starts getting nervous. He thinks they should deal with her. Eventually we do see that the guy that was abducted in the very beginning, they sentence him to death. Oh, and also, what keeps coming up for the two detectives is every time there's a lead, they find that lead has committed suicide. Eventually up to like 6 or 7 suicides, which are all the deaths of the guys that have done injustices to this group. No matter where they are all over the map. So, with each lead leading to suicide until Charlie is found, they're able to link Charlie with Prince. Spear Girl is solved, no problem. But then they got this much bigger case with the suicides and dealing with Andrews. And in every case of suicide, they see that their stomach has been completely empty, like they've been starved for days, which is evident when we see the killer of Andrew's daughter. But anyway, when they go to take care of her, the detectives follow her, there's a scuffle, and then when all the cops show up at their hideout, he goes completely nuts. He has flashbacks like Charlie does. He has a very over-the-top performance. I mean, he is fun, but I think he would have been more fun in another movie. Whether it be as a military exploitation film or just... I feel like this movie could have been more interesting had they developed the Psycho Puppet, aspect of it. Like, okay, this guy worked for these people, sort of cleaning the streets, in a way. Explore the Court of Owls aspect of it more, have less of this guy, and then develop how, he started off fine, but then the Vietnam flashbacks just kind of screwed with him and made him go off the rails. But of course, it's a low-budget film. I can't hate on it too much. Also, it was taken from an unfinished script. So, I mean, it's going to feel jumbled. It's going to feel unfocused and disjointed. But for all its genre mixings, it was still fairly entertaining. I would say the the two detectives in this were either funnier or more interesting or relatable than the two detectives in, say, Don't Answer the Phone or Any of them in Night School. Which I think Don't Answer the Phone, they were meant to be sort of the comic relief as well, like they were in this, but it felt drier and more natural with those two. Yeah, it's not that I disliked the film, it's just I think there were more aspects that could have been more focused on and developed rather than others. And yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan of the action aspect of it, it in any case, I'm still glad I saw it at least. You know, I can now scratch off another video nasty, another proto slasher. I mean, it came out after Halloween, so I would call it a slasher. But I guess maybe they consider Friday the 13th to be the first official one and the one that really started the boom, even though Halloween had all the ripoffs. But slasher, proto slasher, whatever you want to call it, even if it was just the first half of the film, I thought it was entertaining enough. You know, not enough to be a rant, not enough to hate the film, but I can at least say I saw it once. So, with that, thank you for watching.